After a long trip, I came home and noticed that my key no longer fit in the door. I stood there on the porch for a full minute, my suitcase at my feet, trying the key again and again like some kind of idiot. The metal scraped against the lock cylinder, refusing to turn. 27 years I'd lived in this house. 27 years of coming home to this same green door, and now the damn key wouldn't work. My first thought was that the lock had frozen. It was November, cold enough that frost covered the lawn, but when I touched the knob, it was warm. Someone had been using it recently. I pulled out my phone and called my daughter Sarah. She picked up on the third ring. "Yeah?" "What's going on with the house?" I asked, keeping my voice level. "My key doesn't work." There was a pause, then I heard her cover the phone and say something to someone else. When she came back, her voice had that edge to it, the one she'd developed over the past 2 years. Sharp. Mean. "It's our house now, old-timer." The words hit me like a slap. I gripped the phone tighter. "What are you talking about?" Before she could answer, I heard her husband Tom's voice booming in the background. "We're selling it to pay off my debts." I stood there on my own porch, locked out of my own house, and I felt something cold settle into my chest. Not anger, not yet. Something colder than that, something calculated. I pulled up my text messages and typed quickly, "It worked, just like we planned." I sent it to my lawyer, David Morrison, and waited. The reply came back in 30 seconds. "Perfect. Phase 2 begins now. Don't go to the apartment yet." I smirked, picked up my suitcase, and walked back to my car. They thought they'd won. They thought they'd finally gotten rid of the old man who stood in their way. They had no idea what was coming. The day Jack married Lisa Hartwell, I knew my life was about to become a war zone. The wedding took place at the Riverside Manor, one of those fancy venues with crystal chandeliers and marble floors that cost more to rent for a day than most people made in a month. Lisa's father, Ron, had paid for everything, and he made sure everyone knew it. He stood near the bar in a suit that probably cost $5,000, his thick neck bulging over his collar, surveying the crowd like a king watching his subjects. Jack looked uncomfortable in his tuxedo. My boy had always been soft, the kind of kid who cried when other kids were mean to him at school. His mother had babied him before the cancer took her 5 years back, and after she died, I'd tried to toughen him up. But by then, it was too late. He'd already learned that whining and pleading got him what he wanted. I'd watched him drift through his 20s, taking money from me to pay for failed business ventures and bad investments. Then he'd met Lisa at some charity event her father hosted, and suddenly Jack thought he'd hit the jackpot. The Hartwells had money. Real money. The kind that came from 3 generations of ruthless business deals and political connections that ran all the way to the governor's office. The ceremony itself was nice enough. I played my part, smiled for the photos, shook hands with people I didn't know and would never see again. But I could feel the tension building. Ron Hartwell kept looking at me with this little smirk on his face, like he knew a secret I didn't. After the ceremony, during the reception, I was standing near the head table when Lisa cornered me. She moved like a shark, all smooth motion and cold eyes. Her white dress probably cost more than my car. "We need to talk about your apartment," she said, not bothering with small talk. I took a sip of my champagne. "What about it?" "Jack and I are going to need it. We're planning to renovate and rent it out. The rental income will help us get started with our life together." She smiled, but there was nothing warm in it. "You'll need to give us the keys tonight." I set down my glass carefully. "That apartment is mine. I bought it 30 years ago with money I saved from working 2 jobs. Jack says it should be his. Family property should stay in the family." She held out her hand, palm up, like I was some kind of servant. "The keys, please." I looked past her and saw Jack standing about 10 feet away, watching us but not coming closer. My daughter Sarah was next to him, whispering something in his ear. Her husband Tom stood behind them, arms crossed, that stupid grin on his face. "No," I said quietly. Lisa's face hardened. She raised her voice, projecting it across the reception hall so that conversations started to die down. "You're being incredibly selfish right now. Jack is your son, your only son, and you're treating him like he's nothing. What kind of father does that?" People were turning to look now. I saw Ron Hartwell moving closer, that smirk getting wider. This was planned. This whole confrontation was something they'd set up. "The apartment stays mine," I said, keeping my voice level. "You're a bitter old man." Lisa's voice went up another notch. "Jack told me how you've always held money over his head, making him beg for everything. Well, that's over now. He has a real family who actually cares about him. If you cared about him, you wouldn't be trying to steal from his father," I said. That's when she slapped me. The sound echoed through the hall like a gunshot. Conversation stopped completely. Someone gasped. A glass shattered somewhere. I felt the sting spread across my left cheek, but I didn't move. I just stood there, looking at this woman who'd married my son 3 hours ago, and I saw exactly what she was. A manipulator. A user. Someone who'd found a weak man she could control and was now trying to isolate him from anyone who might interfere. Jack rushed over, but he went to Lisa's side, not mine. "Dad, just give us the keys. Why are you making this such a big deal?" I looked at my son, really looked at him. He'd chosen her over me without a second thought. He'd stood there and watched her humiliate me in front of 200 people, and his only concern was that I was making things difficult. "You're making a mistake, Jack," I said quietly. "The only mistake is you embarrassing us at our own wedding," Lisa hissed. Her face was red now, her careful makeup starting to crack. "Get out! Just get out!" Sarah appeared at my elbow. "Dad, maybe you should leave. You're causing a scene." I looked at my daughter. She'd married Tom Brennan 2 years ago, and that's when things had started to change. Tom worked for Ron Hartwell, some middle management position in one of Ron's property development companies. The job paid well, and suddenly Sarah had money for the first time in her life. She'd grown up lower middle class, and now she was tasting what wealth felt like. She wasn't going to give that up, not even for her father. "I'm leaving," I said. I looked at Jack one more time. "When this all falls apart, and it will, don't come crying to me." I turned and walked through the silent crowd toward the exit. Behind me, I heard Ron Hartwell's booming laugh, loud and deliberate. "Well, that was entertaining. Someone get the music going again. This is a celebration." As I pushed through the doors into the parking lot, I heard the music start up again, and the conversations resumed. Within minutes, they'd all forget about the scene. They'd go back to drinking Ron's champagne and eating his expensive food, and I'd just be some footnote to the evening. But I wasn't going to forget. I got in my car and sat there for a moment, my hands on the steering wheel. Then I pulled out my phone and made a call. "David, it's me. It's time to start." My lawyer's voice was calm. "You're sure about this?" "I'm sure. They just made their first move. Now we make ours." 2 days after the wedding, I was sitting in my apartment going through paperwork when someone knocked on my door. I wasn't expecting anyone, and for a moment I thought it might be Jack, coming to apologize or maybe to try one more time to get the keys. It wasn't Jack. Billy Patterson stood in the hallway, looking older than I remembered but still with that same crooked smile. I hadn't seen Billy in 15 years, not since he'd moved to California chasing some tech startup job that was supposed to make him rich. "Heard you had some excitement at your son's wedding," he said. I stepped back and let him in. Word travels fast. Lisa posted about it on social media, said her new father-in-law caused a scene and had to be escorted out. Billy walked into my living room and looked around. "You always kept this place neat. I remember that about you." I closed the door. "What are you doing back in town, Billy?" He sat down on my couch without being invited, which was very Billy. "Divorce," Lost everything in California. The house, the savings, even my dog. She got the dog. Can you believe that? I love that dog." He shook his head. "Figured I'd come back here, start over somewhere familiar." I went to the kitchen and poured 2 cups of coffee. When I came back, Billy was looking at the photo on my mantel, the one of my wife Margaret taken a year before she died. She was standing in the garden, holding a tomato and smiling at the camera. "I miss her," Billy said quietly. "Me too." I handed him a cup. "But you didn't come here to talk about Margaret." "No." He sipped the coffee and grimaced. "You still make terrible coffee. It's not supposed to taste good. It's supposed to wake you up." Billy laughed, but it faded quickly. "I saw the video. Someone recorded the whole thing and put it online. Your son's wife slapping you, the whole confrontation. It's got about 50,000 views." I sat down in my chair. "Good. Good?" "Evidence," I said. "The more public this gets, the better." Billy studied me. "You're planning something." "They're going to try to take everything from me, Billy. The apartment, the house, probably my pension if they can figure out how. Ron Hartwell has lawyers and money and connections that go all the way up the state political machine. My daughter married into his organization, and now my son did too. They're all connected, one big happy family, and I'm the outsider. So what are you going to do?" I smiled. "I'm going to let them think they're winning, and then I'm going to take it all back." Billy set down his coffee cup. "You need help?" "You offering?" "I've got nothing else going on. And besides, you helped me out back in the day when I needed it. Time to return the favor." He leaned forward. "What's the plan?" I spent the next hour explaining what I'd started putting together with David Morrison. It was a simple plan, really, built on the assumption that Ron Hartwell was going to overreach. Men like Ron always did. They got so used to winning that they stopped being careful. "You're going to let them take the house?" Billy asked when I finished. "Temporarily. I need them to commit fraud, something big enough that it can't be explained away. David's been working on setting up trusts and legal structures that will protect my actual assets. But we need to give Ron something to go after, something that looks valuable enough to make him show his hand. That's risky. Everything worth doing is risky." I looked at the photo of Margaret. She used to tell me I was too forgiving, too willing to let people walk on me. Maybe she was right. But I'm done being the nice guy, Billy. They slapped me in front of 200 people. They humiliated me. They're going to learn what happens when you push someone too far. Billy nodded slowly. "Okay, I'm in. What do you need me to do?" "I need you to dig into Ron Hartwell's business dealings. Public records, tax filings, property transfers. He's been operating for 30 years, and there's no way his hands are clean. We just need to find the dirt." "I can do that. I got pretty good at research working in tech." Billy stood up. "But I'm going to need access to some databases, maybe a couple of subscriptions to record services. I'll pay for whatever you need." I walked him to the door. "And Billy, don't tell anyone you're helping me. Not your family, not old friends. No one." "Paranoid much?" "Careful," I corrected. "There's a difference." After Billy left, I sat in my apartment and thought about what was coming. I'd spent 30 years working security for various companies, everything from retail stores to corporate offices to private events. I'd seen every kind of scam, every type of manipulation. I knew how people operated when they thought they could get away with something. Ron Hartwell thought he was smart, but he was predictable. He'd targeted Jack because Jack was weak and easy to control. Now he was targeting me because he wanted my property. The house was worth about $500,000, sitting on land that was getting more valuable every year as the city expanded. The apartment was worth another $200,000. But more than the money, Ron wanted to prove he could take whatever he wanted. It was about power for men like him. It always was. My phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. "Dad, we need to talk about the apartment. Jack really needs it." I didn't respond. Let her stew. 3 hours later, another text. You're being unreasonable. This is family. I deleted it without reading the whole thing. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the look on Jack's face at the wedding, the way he'd chosen Lisa over me without hesitation. I'd raised that boy by myself after Margaret died. I'd worked 2 jobs to pay for his college. I'd helped him when he got in trouble, bailed him out when he made mistakes, and he'd repaid me by standing there while his wife slapped me. Some people might have been hurt by that, wounded, but I just felt cold, clinical. I'd learned a long time ago that sentiment was a weakness in situations like this. You couldn't let emotion cloud your judgment. I was going to destroy Ron Hartwell and everyone who'd sided with him, and I was going to do it legally, methodically, in a way they'd never see coming. 3 weeks after the wedding, Jack showed up at my apartment. It was late, almost 9 at night, and when I opened the door, he looked terrible. His eyes were red and puffy like he'd been crying, and he hadn't shaved in days. "I need money," he said without preamble. $50,000. I leaned against the door frame, not inviting him in yet. "That's a lot of money, Jack. What for?" "I can't tell you. I just need it." He wouldn't look at me, his eyes darting around like he was afraid someone might be watching. "Please, Dad, I'm in trouble." "What kind of trouble?" He shook his head. "I can't explain, but if I don't get this money, something bad is going to happen." I studied him. Jack had always been a terrible liar. When he was a kid and he'd break something or get in trouble at school, I could always tell because he'd get this nervous energy, couldn't stand still, couldn't make eye contact. He had that same energy now but mixed with genuine fear. "Come inside," I said. He practically fell through the door. I closed it behind him and led him to the kitchen table. I made coffee while he sat there with his head in his hands, and when I set the cup in front of him, he grabbed it like a drowning man grabbing a life preserver. "Talk," I said. It took him a few minutes to start, and when he did, the words came out in a rush. "Lisa's father told me about an investment opportunity, real estate development in Florida, luxury condos near Miami. He said it was a guaranteed return, that he had inside information about the area. He said if I put in $50,000, I'd have $100,000 back in 6 months. I sipped my coffee and said nothing. I took money from our joint account with Lisa. I thought I'd surprise her, show her I could be a good provider. But the investment went bad. The development company filed for bankruptcy, and all the investors lost everything. Jack looked up at me, his eyes desperate. But that's not the worst part. There's more? The company was involved in some kind of fraud. The FBI is investigating. And now the people who were supposed to build the condos, they're saying the investors knew about the fraud. They're saying we were part of it. His hands were shaking. Ron said he'd help me. He said he'd make the problem go away if I helped him with something. What something? Jack's voice dropped to almost a whisper. He wants the house. Your house. He said if I could get you to sign it over to me, he'd use it as collateral to pay off the people who are coming after me. He'd refinance it, pull out the equity, and make my debt disappear. There it was, the whole plan laid out. I kept my face neutral. And you agreed to this? What choice do I have? Jack's voice cracked. These aren't just lawyers, Dad. These are dangerous people. Ron knows people who know people. If I don't pay, they'll hurt me. They'll hurt Lisa. Ron set you up, I said flatly. Jack blinked. What? The investment was fake. Ron owns both sides of that deal. He took your money, created fake losses, then offered to bail you out in exchange for my property. I pulled out my phone and showed him a file Billy had sent me that morning. This is the incorporation documents for the Florida Development Company. Look at the registered agent. Jack stared at the screen. That's Ron's lawyer. Ron created this whole situation to put you in debt, and now he's using that debt to extort you into helping him steal my house. I set down the phone. You're the fall guy, Jack. If this goes south, you're the one who goes to prison, not Ron. All the color drained from Jack's face. No, he wouldn't do that. Lisa's his daughter. and Lisa's your wife, but that didn't stop her from slapping me at your wedding, did it? I leaned forward. This is what men like Ron do. They find weak people, people who are desperate or greedy or both, and they use them. And when those people stop being useful, they throw them away. Jack sat there in silence for a long time. Then, quietly, "What do I do?" "You tell me everything. Every conversation you had with Ron, every detail about this investment, every threat he's made. And then we go to my lawyer and we figure out how to fix this. I can't testify against Ron. Lisa would never forgive me. Lisa is part of this, whether she knows it or not. And if you don't help yourself now, you're going to end up in prison while Ron walks away clean." I stood up. "You've got a choice to make, Jack. You can protect yourself, or you can protect the people who are using you. But you can't do both." Jack looked up at me with tears running down his face. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry for everything. The wedding, the things I said, all of it. Save the apology. Right now, I need you to focus." I pulled out my phone and called David Morrison. "We're recording this conversation. Tell me everything again, and don't leave out any details." It took 2 hours. Jack talked and I recorded, and slowly, the whole picture came together. Ron hadn't just set up the fake investment. He'd been manipulating Jack for months, ever since Jack started dating Lisa. Small things at first, advice about money, suggestions about business opportunities, then bigger things. Ron had convinced Jack to quit his job and work for one of Ron's companies, isolating him from his old support network. He'd encouraged the relationship with Lisa, knowing Jack would be easier to control once he was married into the family. The fake investment was just the latest move in a long game Ron had been playing. "He's going to use the house to finance other deals," Jack said. "He told me the property is worth way more than $500,000 because of the development potential. He's going to tear it down and build luxury apartments. He's already got the plans drawn up." "Does Lisa know about this?" Jack shook his head. "She thinks he's helping me. She thinks he's being a good father." "What about Sarah and Tom?" "Tom works for Ron. He does whatever Ron tells him. Sarah just goes along with whatever Tom says." Jack wiped his eyes. "I don't think she knows how bad this is." I doubted that. Sarah wasn't stupid. She knew exactly what kind of man Ron was, but she'd chosen the money over her principles. That was worse than being manipulated. That was making a conscious choice to be complicit. "Okay," I said when we'd covered everything. "Here's what happens next. You're going to go home and act like nothing's changed. You don't tell Lisa about this conversation. You don't tell Ron. Tomorrow, you're going to meet with my lawyer and make an official statement. After that, we're going to the FBI." Jack's eyes went wide. "The FBI? If Ron's running fake investment schemes, that's wire fraud. That's federal. And federal investigators don't care how well-connected Ron thinks he is." I grabbed his shoulder. "You can still fix this, Jack, but you have to be brave enough to do the right thing." He nodded slowly. Okay, I'll do it." "Good. Now go home. And Jack?" I waited until he looked at me. "Don't trust anyone in that family. Not Ron, not Lisa, not even your sister. They're all in this together, whether they admit it or not." After Jack left, I poured myself a whiskey and sat in the dark apartment, thinking. Ron had made his move faster than I'd expected, but that was fine. The plan was still working. Billy had been digging into Ron's background for 3 weeks now, and what he'd found was damning. Ron's business empire was built on fraud, from fake property improvements to money laundering through his daughter's boutique. We almost had enough to bring him down. Jack's testimony would be the final piece. My phone buzzed with a text from Billy. "Found something big. Call me." I called. "Ron's got a pattern," Billy said without preamble. "Over the past 10 years, he's done this same scam 6 times. He targets young men from middle-class families, usually men dating his daughter or working for his companies. He sets them up with fake investments, puts them in debt, then uses that debt to gain control of their family's property. 3 of the guys ended up in prison for fraud. 2 of them committed suicide. 1 disappeared. I felt something cold settle in my stomach. You're sure? I've got court records, bankruptcy filings. Ron's been doing this for a decade and nobody's caught him because he's careful about spreading it around. Different states, different victims. No obvious pattern unless you're looking for it. Billy paused. Your son was just the latest mark. Send me everything you have. I'll forward it to David and the FBI contact he's been cultivating. Already done. I sent it 10 minutes ago. Billy's voice was grim. This guy's a monster, and he's been getting away with it because he's rich and connected. But we've got him now. The evidence is solid. After I hung up, I sat in the dark for a long time. I'd known Ron was bad, but this was worse than I'd imagined. 6 victims over 10 years, 3 in prison, 1 missing, and my son had almost been number 7. I thought about Margaret, about what she'd say if she was here. She'd always been the compassionate one, the one who believed people could change. But she'd also been fierce when it came to protecting family. She would have approved of what I was doing, I think. She would have wanted me to fight. I finished my whiskey and went to bed. Tomorrow, things were going to start moving fast. The next 3 days dragged on like a slow-moving storm. I kept my phone close, always checking for calls, emails, or any sign that Ron Hartwell had decided to play his hand. I didn't know what I expected, but I knew it wouldn't be easy. People like Ron don't just give up. They fight dirty. And when they've got the kind of power and influence that a man like him holds, you can bet that any legal threat you make could be countered by a dozen others. But I'd taken my shot, and I wasn't about to back down now. By the morning of the 4th day, I started to get the sense that I might have underestimated Ron. It was early when I received a call from my attorney, Rachel Sinclair. She had been handling the legal aspects of Jack's mess and had been the one to liaise with the FBI. Her voice was tight with concern as she spoke. "We've got a problem," she said, her tone leaving no room for pleasantries. "Ron Hartwell filed a counterclaim. He's accusing you of blackmail and extortion. He says you've been threatening him and his family. You need to be careful." I felt a chill spread through me, but I tried to keep my voice steady. "What's the next step?" "They're pushing for an injunction. If they get it, they'll tie up the property in legal red tape for months, maybe longer. It's a classic stall tactic." "Do they have any evidence?" I asked, my mind already running through the possibilities. Rachel hesitated before answering. "Not much, but they've hired a very expensive legal team. And the way they're framing it, they're making you look like a paranoid old man who's trying to protect his house at any cost. The FBI investigation into Jack's Florida deal is giving them the perfect narrative to sell." "Of course they are," I muttered. I knew how these things worked. It wasn't about justice. It was about who could afford the better lawyers, who had more leverage, and who could sway the public perception. "What do you want to do?" Rachel asked, cutting through the silence. I thought about it for a moment. "Hold tight. Don't make any moves just yet. I'll handle this." I hung up the phone and paced around my living room. The reality of the situation was that I was getting drawn into a legal battle I wasn't prepared for. I wasn't a lawyer. I wasn't rich enough to fight Ron on that front, and I sure as hell wasn't used to playing games at his level. But what I did have was experience. I knew how to handle people like him, and I wasn't going to let him walk all over me, or my son. I took a deep breath and called Jack. He picked up on the second ring, his voice a little flat. "Hey, Dad." "Jack, I need to know something. Did Ron tell you about the counterclaim?" There was a pause, and I could almost hear him scrubbing his face. "Yeah, he did. The guy's a piece of work, isn't he?" "You don't even know the half of it," I said, my frustration bubbling up again. "He's pulling out all the stops, Jack. He's trying to make me out to be the villain in all of this." "I know," Jack said softly. "I'm sorry, Dad. This is my mess, and You don't have to apologize to me," I interrupted. "But you've got to start thinking about what you're going to do to fix it. I'm going to need you to work with me on this." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Finally, Jack spoke. "What do you need me to do?" "Stay in the background. I'll handle the heavy lifting. But I need you to think about what you can do to get out of this mess. You can't hide from it forever, Jack. If you've got any more dirt on Ron, anything at all, now's the time to bring it to the table." "Okay," Jack said, his voice sounding a little more confident. "I've got a few things I could tell you, but nothing concrete. Nothing that would bring him down, at least not without a major fight." "That's fine. We'll work with what we've got. Just stay in touch." We hung up, and I spent the next few hours organizing my thoughts. Ron wasn't going to let this go easily. If anything, I suspected he would try to make good on his threats. He might try to push me further into a corner, test my resolve, or maybe even try to use Jack as leverage against me. The question was, how far he was willing to go. The next day, I got my answer. I was sitting at my kitchen table drinking coffee and going over some notes when the doorbell rang. I didn't expect anyone, so I was cautious when I opened it. Standing on my porch was a tall man in a sharp suit, carrying a briefcase. His expression was calm, but there was something about him, something that made me immediately suspicious. "Mr. Daniels?" he asked, his voice smooth and practiced. "That's me," I said, narrowing my eyes. "I'm Christopher Barnes. I'm Ron Hartwell's attorney. May I come in? We need to discuss some matters." I didn't let him in right away, but I didn't slam the door in his face either. "What's this about?" "It's a delicate matter," Barnes said. "I'm here on behalf of my client to offer you a resolution. We don't want this to escalate, Mr. Daniels. Ron is a reasonable man. He's willing to make a deal." I crossed my arms and leaned against the doorframe, my mind racing. This was it, the negotiation I had expected. "And what kind of deal are we talking about?" I asked, keeping my tone cool. Barnes smiled, though it didn't reach his eyes. "Ron is willing to forgive Jack's debt in exchange for your cooperation in the matter of the house. All we ask is that you sign a few papers, and the FBI investigation will be quietly dropped." "And what happens if I don't sign?" I asked, already knowing the answer. Barnes's smile didn't falter. "Then things become complicated. There are things we can do to make your situation very difficult, Mr. Daniels. You'll find yourself under investigation by more than just the FBI. We wouldn't want that, would we?" I felt the old anger building up in my chest. This was it, the moment I had been waiting for, but I had to play this carefully. "I'll tell you what, Mr. Barnes," I said, stepping forward. "You tell Ron that I've got 72 hours to get this all cleaned up. He can either walk away or face the consequences." Barnes's eyes flashed, but he didn't seem surprised. "We'll be in touch." He turned and left without another word. I shut the door behind him and took a moment to compose myself. I wasn't going to back down. I wasn't going to let Ron win. The clock was ticking, and I had one shot left to make this right. The next day, as I sat at my kitchen table again, going over my options, my phone rang. It was Rachel. "I think you might have just won," she said, her voice filled with disbelief. "Ron just pulled back his counterclaim, and we've got an anonymous tip coming in with more evidence of his dealings. It's all adding up, Frank. The FBI is moving in." A weight I hadn't realized I was carrying lifted off my shoulders. The fight wasn't over, but it felt like we were finally on the winning side. "Good," I said, "but I'm not done yet. Ron's still got a lot to answer for, and I'm going to make sure he does." As I hung up, I knew this wasn't just about saving the house anymore. It was about making sure Ron Hartwell paid for what he'd done to me, to Jack, and to everyone else he had wronged, and I'd make sure the FBI got everything they needed. The next morning, I barely slept. My mind churned with everything that had happened in the past 48 hours. Ron's reaction wasn't just a sign of desperation. It was a calculated move to try and break me through my family. If he thought he could intimidate me by going after Sarah and Tom, He was gravely mistaken. But this wasn't just about me anymore. It was about protecting them, making sure that Ron didn't destroy everything they had worked for. The phone rang early. It was Tom. "Dad, I don't know what to do. They're saying they've got all this evidence against me. I don't even know where to start looking for a lawyer. Stop!" I cut him off. "I told you to get a lawyer, Tom. A good one. Don't sign anything. Don't talk to Ron's people. Just get yourself someone who knows how to fight dirty, because Ron's about to throw everything he's got at you." "I know, but what if they come for me first? What if they drag me in front of the police or—" "They will," I said, my voice tight. "And when they do, you'll have that lawyer with you. But you'll also have the truth on your side. If you start talking, Tom, if you cooperate with Ron, it'll all come back to you. I'm telling you, right now, your best chance is to stand firm. If Ron gets away with this, it's not just your job on the line. It's everything." Tom didn't respond for a long while. Finally, he spoke again, quieter. "You're right. I'll get someone. But Dad, I don't know how much longer I can keep this up. Ron's pulling every string, and if I go down for this, he's got me." "We'll handle it," I reassured him. "You're not alone in this." I could hear the relief in his voice when he spoke again. "Thanks, Dad." I hung up, then dialed Rachel. She picked up on the second ring, her voice brisk. "What's happening now?" "Ron's making his move. He just fired Tom and is trying to ruin his life with these bogus embezzlement charges. He's using him to get to me. We've got to protect Tom and Sarah." "Got it," Rachel replied immediately. "I'll make some calls to start getting a defense ready. But Frank, I'm telling you, this could be a problem if it goes to court. We can get the charges dropped, but only if Tom cooperates. If he doesn't, this will drag out, and it will only make Ron look more credible." "I know, Rachel. He'll cooperate. He doesn't have a choice." "Good. Keep me posted." The weight of the situation settled on me once the call ended. Ron wasn't just fighting for control of the house. He was willing to tear apart everything and everyone in his path to make sure I didn't win. He was playing the long game, pushing buttons that would have consequences I couldn't fully predict. But what Ron didn't realize was that I wasn't as vulnerable as he thought. I wasn't just some victim to be manipulated or a pawn to be moved. I had a plan, and I wasn't going to stop. I spent the day gathering everything I had: files, notes, recorded conversations, anything that could help turn the tide. The FBI was still investigating, but I knew that time was running out. Ron was moving fast, and so were we. Billy called later in the afternoon. "Frank, we've got another update on Ron's activity. He's moving money, but now he's also transferring property around like crazy. Lisa Hartwell's name is all over it. The properties are getting shuffled off to shell companies. Any way we can stop it?" "Not without tipping our hand. We're close, but we need to let Ron keep digging his own grave. The FBI will be able to claw back these fraudulent transfers, but we can't make it obvious we're onto him yet." I ran a hand through my hair. "He's panicking. He's making mistakes." "Exactly. But you know what that means, right? He's dangerous. He'll do anything to cover his tracks." "I know," I said, my thoughts racing. "But it's not just about us anymore. Ron's trying to use my family to control me. He's already gone after Sarah and Tom. The next step will be to come after me directly." Billy was silent for a moment. Then he spoke again. "Don't get too ahead of yourself, Frank. We've got leverage now. Ron doesn't know it. But we've got the upper hand. He's the one in a corner, and the more he keeps going, the more we've got to use against him." "You're right," I said, a cold smile forming on my lips. "We're not just playing defense anymore. It's time to hit back." Later that evening, David Morrison called. "I've got some good news and some bad news," he said. "The good news is that the FBI is digging into Ron's assets and they're starting to connect the dots. They've got a few sources willing to talk, but they need more. He's moving money faster than they can track it." "I figured as much," I replied. "But we're still ahead, right?" "For now," David said. "But we can't let him keep doing this. If we wait too long, he might just disappear before we can close in. Then let's move faster, I said. What do we need to do? We need to get everything lined up for the next phase, David said. More people need to start talking, and we need leverage. Do you have anything new? I've got a few things, I said, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. But we're going to have to take some risks. I'll be ready. Just tell me when to go. After hanging up, I sat alone in the dark, the weight of everything pressing down on me. Ron had made his move, but I was ready for him. He wasn't going to win this fight, not if I had anything to say about it. I wasn't just going to take the hits, I was going to give them back. The next few days were a blur of meetings, phone calls, and the slow crawl of the legal process. Every time I thought I could catch a breath, Ron found another way to keep pushing. But I could see the cracks starting to form in his armor. His moves were getting sloppier, more desperate. Then, just as I was beginning to think that we were finally turning the tide, Ron called. "Mr. Daniels," his voice oozed with false politeness. "I'd like to make a deal." I clenched my fists, already knowing what was coming. "What kind of deal?" "I'll drop all the charges against Tom," he said smoothly. "I'll even forgive the debt. But in exchange, I need you to back off. The FBI investigation into me? It goes away. All the things you've threatened to expose? They stay buried. And if I refuse? Then I'll make sure your son-in-law spends the rest of his life in prison, and I'll see to it that your house becomes the property of someone else. You won't be able to stop me." I felt a surge of anger, but I knew I had to stay calm. "That's not going to happen, Ron. You've made your move, and I'm not backing down. You've got 72 hours. Do what you need to do, but I'll make sure everyone knows exactly what you've been up to." The line went silent for a moment before Ron spoke again, his voice dripping with menace. "You think you've won, don't you?" "I know I have," I said. "You just don't know it yet." The call ended, and I sat back, letting the tension wash over me. The fight wasn't over, but it was closer than Ron thought. And when the time came, I was going to make sure that he paid for every single thing he had done. Over the next week, Ron launched a full assault. He called in favors with local media, and suddenly there were stories about my violent outburst at Jack's wedding. The video of Lisa slapping me was edited to make it look like I'd threatened her first. Comment sections filled with people calling me an abusive father and a deadbeat. My phone rang constantly with reporters asking for statements. I didn't answer. Sarah called me 3 times a day, begging me to back off. Tom had been arrested on the embezzlement charges. They'd had to mortgage their car to make bail. She blamed me for all of it. "This is your fault," she screamed during one call. "You couldn't just let it go. You had to start a war." "I didn't start anything," I said calmly. "Ron did. I'm just finishing it." She hung up on me. Jack stopped answering my calls entirely. I got a message from his lawyer, not David, some corporate guy Ron had provided, saying that Jack was withdrawing his statement and would not be cooperating with any investigation into Ron's business practices. Ron had gotten to him, probably threatened Lisa, or promised to make everything go away if Jack just stayed quiet. I'd expected this. People like Jack didn't have backbones. When things got hard, they folded. But I didn't need Jack anymore. Billy had found enough evidence on his own, and the FBI was already building their case. Jack's statement would have helped, but it wasn't essential. The real pressure came from the neighborhood. Someone started a rumor that I was dangerous, that I'd threatened multiple people. My neighbors stopped making eye contact when I saw them. Someone spray-painted "crazy old man" on my mailbox. I repainted it and said nothing. Through all of this, I kept to my routine. I got up at 6 every morning, made my terrible coffee, and worked with Billy on compiling more evidence against Ron. We were building an airtight case, cross-referencing years of property records and financial documents. The FBI agent David had connected us with, a woman named Jennifer Stokes, was impressed with our work. "This is better than what my own analysts put together," she said during a meeting. You should have been an investigator. I'm too mean to work for the government, I said. She laughed. I can see that. 2 weeks after my confrontation with Ron, I got the call I'd been waiting for. David's voice was excited. They're executing search warrants tomorrow morning. Ron's office, his home, the daughter's boutique, everything. They're moving fast. What about Tom's charges? They'll be dropped as soon as Ron's arrested. The prosecutor knows it's retaliation. And Jack? He'll probably be questioned, but since he withdrew his cooperation, they'll go easy on him. He's more useful as a witness than a defendant. After I hung up, I sat in my apartment and thought about Margaret. She'd always told me that patience was a virtue. For years, I'd thought that meant letting people walk all over you, accepting mistreatment with a smile. I understood now that she meant something different. Real patience wasn't passive, it was strategic. It was waiting for the right moment to act, building your case piece by piece until your enemy had nowhere left to run. Ron had thought he was patient too, running his schemes over a decade, but he'd gotten greedy and sloppy. He'd left a trail, and now that trail was going to destroy him. I didn't watch the raid happen, but Billy did. He parked across the street from Ron's office building with a camera and recorded everything. The FBI arrived at 7 in the morning with 3 black SUVs and a warrant. Agents in windbreakers poured into the building while others blocked the exits. Billy counted 15 agents total, plus local police providing support. Ron was escorted out in handcuffs 2 hours later. Billy's photos showed him looking smaller somehow, his expensive suit wrinkled, his face pale and shocked. The man who'd spent years manipulating people and destroying lives finally looked like what he was, a criminal being caught. By noon, the news was everywhere. Local developer arrested in multi-state fraud scheme, read one headline. FBI uncovers decade-long property scam, read another. The reporters who'd been calling me about being an abusive father suddenly wanted comments about Ron instead. I didn't give them any. Lisa called me that afternoon. She was crying so hard I could barely understand her. They took my dad. They're saying he's a criminal. Tell them it's not true. I can't tell them that, Lisa. It is true. You did this. You destroyed my family. No. Your father destroyed your family when he decided to prey on vulnerable people for 10 years. I just made sure he got caught. I paused. Jack's going to need you now. He's going to need you to be strong. Jack. Her voice turned sharp. Jack knew about this. He's been talking to your lawyer behind my back. He betrayed my father. Your father tried to frame Jack for fraud. Jack was trying to protect himself. I want a divorce, she screamed. I want nothing to do with him or you or any of this. I sat there holding the phone, thinking about how quickly things fell apart. 2 weeks ago, Lisa and Jack were newlyweds planning their future. Now their marriage was over, her father was in federal custody, and everything they'd built was collapsing. Some people might have felt guilty about that. But I'd seen the files on Ron's other victims, the 3 men in prison who'd lost years of their lives. Ron had destroyed countless lives without remorse. If his own daughter got caught in the fallout, that was on him, not me. Sarah called next. Her voice was cold and controlled. They dropped the charges against Tom. Good. The FBI wants him to testify against Ron. They said if he cooperates, they'll help him find a new job. He should cooperate. I know. She was quiet for a moment. I'm sorry, Dad. For everything. I got caught up in the money and the lifestyle, and I forgot what actually matters. Are you apologizing because you mean it, or because Ron can't help you anymore? The question hung in the air between us. Finally, Sarah said, Does it matter? Yeah, it does. She hung up. I understood what Sarah was doing. She was trying to get back on my good side now that Ron was out of the picture. But apologies without changed behavior didn't mean anything. She'd sided against me when it was convenient, and now she was trying to side with me again for the same reason. I was done with people who only cared about me when they needed something. 3 weeks after Ron's arrest, I took my trip to Arizona. My brother Paul had been asking me to visit for months, and I figured now was a good time to get out of town. Let things settle down. Let the legal process play out without me hovering over it. Paul picked me up from the airport, and we spent a week hiking in the desert and not talking about Ron or the investigation or any of it. It was peaceful. It reminded me of why I'd loved Arizona when I was younger, before Margaret and I had settled in the East. "You could move out here," Paul said one evening over beers on his patio. "Start fresh. Leave all that mess behind." "I'm not leaving," I said. "That's my home. Your kids tried to take it from you. They failed." I took a sip of beer. "Besides, I'm not letting them run me off. I built my life there. Margaret's buried there. I'm staying." Paul nodded. He understood. He'd lost his own wife to a car accident 10 years ago and had stayed in the same house they'd shared. Some places held too many memories to leave. When I flew back and drove home from the airport, I was thinking about what to make for dinner. Something simple, maybe pasta. I was tired from traveling and just wanted to relax. That's when I found that my key didn't work. Standing there on my porch, trying the key over and over, I felt a surge of satisfaction. They'd actually done it. After weeks of planning and patience, they'd finally committed the fraud I'd been waiting for. I called Sarah and had the conversation we'd scripted months ago with David. She played her part perfectly, telling me the house was theirs now. Tom's voice in the background about selling it to pay his debts. It was almost too easy. I texted David, "It worked, just like we planned." His response, "Perfect. Phase 2 begins now. Don't go to the apartment yet." I got in my car and drove to Billy's place. He was waiting with a laptop and a grin. "They filed the fraudulent transfer paperwork while you were gone," he said, showing me the documents on screen. "Used a forged signature and everything. Your daughter and Tom went to a notary public and claimed to be you. We've got the notary's statement, the transfer documents, and security camera footage from the notary's office." Did the notary know it was fraud? Probably not. They had fake ID and everything. Ron's people know how to run a con. Billy pulled up another file. But here's the beautiful part. Ron was directing the whole thing from jail. He's been making calls to Tom, giving him instructions. The FBI's been recording all of it. I laughed. I couldn't help it. Ron was so arrogant that he'd committed new crimes while already facing federal charges. He'd used the jail phone system, which was monitored and recorded, to orchestrate property fraud. "He really thinks he's untouchable," I said. "Thought," Billy corrected. "Past tense. After this, they're going to throw every charge they can at him." The next morning, I met with David and Agent Stokes at a coffee shop downtown. I brought all the documentation about the house, the fraudulent transfer, everything. "This is perfect," Stokes said, flipping through the papers. "This gives us leverage for additional charges, fraud, identity theft, conspiracy, and since Ron directed it from jail, we can add obstruction and witness tampering to the list." "What about Sarah and Tom?" I asked. "They'll be charged unless they cooperate. Given that they're small fish and Ron's the whale, I'm guessing they'll flip." Stokes closed the folder. "We'll need you to make a formal statement about the property theft." I spent the next 3 hours at the FBI field office going through every detail of what had happened. The key not working. The phone call. Finding out about the forged documents. They recorded everything, took photos of the documents, and had me sign multiple statements. When I was done, Stokes walked me out. "I've been doing this for 15 years, she said, "and I've never seen a civilian build a case this thoroughly. You should be proud." "I'm not proud. I'm just tired." I stopped at the door. "How long until Ron goes to trial?" "Probably a year, maybe 18 months. Federal cases move slowly, but with the evidence we have, he'll plead out. He's looking at 20 years minimum, probably more with the new charges." 20 years. Ron was 63 years old. Even with good behavior, he'd be in his 80s before he got out. His life was effectively over. I felt nothing about that. No satisfaction, no regret, just a cold sense of completion. Over the next few weeks, everything fell into place. Sarah and Tom agreed to testify against Ron in exchange for reduced charges. They'd plead guilty to minor fraud charges, get probation and community service, but no jail time. As part of the deal, they had to immediately reverse the property transfer and pay restitution for any costs I'd incurred. Jack filed for divorce from Lisa. She was fighting it, trying to claim half of everything he owned, but she had no case. They'd been married for less than 3 months, and she was the daughter of a man who'd tried to defraud Jack. Any judge would side with him. Lisa herself moved back in with her mother, who'd divorced Ron the week after his arrest. Smart woman. She'd seen the writing on the wall and gotten out while she still could. The house was officially transferred back to my trust. David had the locks changed and gave me new keys. I moved back in on a cold December morning, carrying my suitcase up the same porch steps where I'd stood months ago, locked out. This time, the key worked. Billy moved into the apartment. He needed a place to stay, and I needed someone I could trust nearby. We split the costs and settled into an easy routine. He kept doing research work, now consulting for law firms who needed investigators. I went back to my normal life, or what passed for normal after everything that had happened. The trial happened 14 months later. Ron pled guilty to 23 counts of fraud, money laundering, conspiracy, and identity theft. The judge sentenced him to 25 years in federal prison. With his age and health problems, it was essentially a life sentence. I didn't attend the sentencing. I didn't need to see it. I got a text from David with the details, and that was enough. Jack tried to reconcile. He called me one evening and asked if we could have dinner. I agreed, curious to see what he wanted. We met at a diner halfway between our homes. Jack looked better than he had in months, cleaner and more put together. He'd gotten a job doing accounting for a small firm, nothing glamorous but honest work. "I'm sorry," he said after we'd ordered, "for everything. The wedding, believing Lisa and Ron, trying to take the house, all of it." I sipped my coffee and said nothing. "I know I don't deserve forgiveness," Jack continued, "but I want you to know that I understand now what you were trying to teach me, about being strong, about standing up for yourself. I should have listened years ago." "You should have," I agreed. "Can we start over? Try to rebuild some kind of relationship?" I thought about it. Jack had betrayed me, chosen his wife and her family over me, stood by while I was humiliated, but he'd also been manipulated by people more experienced at manipulation than he was. He'd been weak, not evil. "Maybe," I said finally, "but it's going to take time. You don't get to apologize once and have everything go back to normal." "I understand." We finished dinner and talked about safe things, his job, the weather, a movie he'd seen. When we parted, he shook my hand and said, "Thank you for not giving up on me." I didn't tell him that I had given up on him multiple times, that I'd written him off as a lost cause, that I'd planned everything assuming he'd stay on Ron's side until the end. Some truths didn't need to be spoken. Sarah never apologized again after that first cold phone call. She and Tom moved to Ohio 6 months after the trial, taking jobs with a different company. I got a Christmas card from her that first year, a generic photo card with her and Tom smiling in front of a tree. I threw it away without reading whatever message she'd written inside. Billy and I started the consulting business about a year after everything settled. We called it Patterson & Associates, even though I was the only associate. We specialized in helping families protect their assets from predatory relatives and fraudsters. Turns out, there was a huge market for that kind of service. Our first client was a widow whose stepchildren were trying to force her to sell her house. We documented everything, built a case, and got a restraining order within 2 weeks. She paid us well and referred 3 other clients. Within a year, we were making good money. Within 2 years, we had to hire an assistant to handle all the cases. I was 63 years old and starting a new career. Margaret would have laughed at that. She'd always said I was stubborn enough to reinvent myself no matter what age I was. 2 years after Ron's sentencing, I did something I'd been thinking about for months. I went to visit him in prison. The federal facility was 3 hours away, a low-security prison that looked more like a college campus than what you'd see in movies. I went through security, surrendered my phone and wallet, and was led to the visiting room. Ron was brought in wearing a prison uniform that hung loose on his frame. He'd lost weight, at least 40 pounds, and his skin had that gray tint that came from never seeing sunlight. He looked old, broken. He sat down across from me, separated by a plexiglass barrier. He picked up the phone on his side, and I picked up mine. "What do you want?" he asked. His voice was hoarse, like he didn't use it much. "I wanted to see you," I said. "Wanted to make sure you understood what happened." "I understand perfectly. You destroyed my life." "No. You destroyed your own life. You destroyed 6 other people's lives before you even came after me. I just made sure you got caught." I leaned forward. "Do you know what happened to those people, Ron? The ones you scammed before Jack?" He said nothing. "Timothy Rodriguez put a gun in his mouth when he couldn't face the debt you put him in. His wife found him. His kids were 7 and 9. I kept my voice level. Michael Webb hung himself in his garage. Daniel Thornton is serving 8 years in federal prison for fraud you committed but pinned on him. Should I go on?" Ron's face was stone. "I did what I had to do to build my business. You destroyed people because you could. Because you were greedy and cruel and you thought you were smarter than everyone else." I smiled. "But you weren't smart enough. You think you're better than me?" Ron's voice rose. "You set me up. You manipulated your own son, got him to betray his wife. You're just like me." "No," I said quietly. "I'm worse. Because I did it all legally. Every move I made, every trap I set, it was all within the law. When you get out of here, if you get out of here, you'll have nothing. No money, no reputation, no family. Your daughter won't speak to you. Your ex-wife changed her name. Your business is bankrupt." I stood up. "I wanted you to know that. I wanted you to understand that you lost everything because you couldn't control yourself. You had to push too far, hurt too many people, and that's what got you caught." Ron just stared at me. I hung up the phone and walked out. I didn't look back. Outside, the sun was shining. Billy was waiting by the car. "Feel better?" he asked. "Yeah," I said. "I really do." We drove back in silence. I watched the countryside roll past and thought about everything that had happened. The wedding, the slap, the investigation, the trial. All of it had led to this moment, driving away from a prison where a man who'd tried to destroy me was now spending the rest of his life. Margaret used to tell me that revenge was empty, that it wouldn't make me happy. But this wasn't about happiness. It was about justice. It was about making sure that people who hurt others faced consequences. Ron had hurt too many people and gotten away with it for too long. Now he was paying the price. That wasn't revenge. That was balance. 3 years after that visit, I was sitting on my porch when a car pulled up. A young man got out, maybe mid-20s, nervous energy radiating off him. "Are you the guy who took down Ron Hartwell?" he asked. "Who's asking?" "My name is David Webb. Michael Webb was my father." He walked closer. "I was 13 when it happened. My mom raised me and my sister alone." I gestured to the chair next to me. "Sit down." He sat. Up close, I could see his father in his face. Billy had shown me photos of all Ron's victims during our investigation. Michael Webb had been 38 when he died, a middle manager at a tech company who'd trusted the wrong person. "I heard about what you did," David said. "How you built the case against Hartwell, got the FBI involved, made sure he went to prison. I wanted to thank you. You don't need to thank me. I was protecting myself. Maybe. But you also stopped him from hurting anyone else. David's voice was thick. My dad was a good man. He made one mistake, trusted the wrong investment, and it cost him everything. Hartwell destroyed him and nobody cared. Nobody held him accountable. Until he came after me. Until he came after you, David agreed. He smiled, but there was pain in it. I'm in law school now. I'm going to be a prosecutor. I'm going to put people like Hartwell away so that other kids don't have to grow up without their fathers. We sat there for a while, not talking. Then David stood up and shook my hand. Thank you, he said again. For my dad. After he left, I sat on the porch until the sun went down. I thought about all the lives Ron had destroyed, all the families he'd torn apart. David Webb was just one of many people carrying scars from Ron's crimes. I'd stopped Ron from hurting anyone else. That was worth something. Maybe not redemption, but something. 5 years after the lockout, I got a call from David Morrison. Ron Hartwell died this morning. Heart attack in prison. I sat down. Okay. Thought you'd want to know? Thanks for telling me. After I hung up, I sat in my kitchen and tried to figure out how I felt about it. The man who'd tried to destroy me, who'd hurt so many people, was gone. I felt nothing. No relief, no satisfaction, just a kind of hollow acknowledgement that a chapter was closed. Billy came over that night. We sat on the porch with beers and watched the sun set. You heard? He asked. Yeah. Good riddance. Yeah. We drank in silence. Eventually Billy said, You won, you know. Everything you set out to do, you did it. Protected your assets, got justice, stopped him from hurting anyone else. I know. So why don't you look happy? I thought about that. Because winning doesn't erase what happened. It doesn't bring back Michael Webb or Timothy Rodriguez. It doesn't fix my relationship with Sarah or undo the damage Ron did to Jack. It just means the bleeding stopped. Billy nodded. That's pretty dark. It's realistic. I finished my beer. Margaret was right. Revenge doesn't make you happy, but she was wrong about one thing. What's that? It's still worth doing. We sat until dark. Then Billy went home. I stayed on the porch a while longer, thinking about everything that had happened. The wedding, the slap, the investigation, the trial, the visit to the prison. I'd won. I'd taken back everything they tried to steal. I'd protected myself and stopped a predator from hurting anyone else. But the cost had been my family. Jack and I had a cordial relationship now, but it wasn't what it used to be. There was too much damage, too much betrayal. Sarah was gone, living her life in Ohio, and I hadn't spoken to her in years. My daughter-in-law hated me. My grandchildren, if Jack ever had any, would grow up hearing stories about how their grandfather destroyed their other grandfather. That was the price of justice. That was the cost of standing up for yourself. I went inside and looked at the photo of Margaret on the mantel. She was smiling in that picture, holding her tomato, happy in a way I hadn't seen in years before she died. I did what I had to do, I told the photo. I hope you understand. The photo didn't answer, of course, but I like to think she did understand. Margaret had been compassionate, but she'd also been fierce. She would have fought for what was hers. She would have protected our home. I locked the door behind me, the same door that hadn't opened for me 5 years ago, and went to bed. Tomorrow I'd get up, make my terrible coffee, and keep living my life. That's all anyone could do. Keep living, keep fighting, keep protecting what mattered. The key worked. The door opened. The house was mine. I'd won. But winning felt a lot like losing, just with a different ending. I fell asleep thinking about the look on Ron's face when I'd visited him in prison, the hollow shock of a man who'd finally realized he wasn't as smart as he thought. I fell asleep thinking about David Webb and all the other victims who'd carried scars from Ron's crimes. I fell asleep thinking about justice and whether it was ever really enough. When I woke up, the sun was shining. Billy was already calling with a new case, some family in trouble who needed help. I made my coffee and got ready to start another day. The war was over. I'd survived. I'd protected what was mine. That was enough. It had to be enough. Because in the end, that's all any of us can do. Protect what matters. Stand up when someone tries to take it away. Fight back when the world tries to push us down. I'd done that. I'd fought back. I'd won. And now I got to live with the consequences, good and bad, for however many years I had left. The key fit. The door opened. The house was mine. That was all that mattered.